Mark was back in the hospital, and since Isabella was his lead surgeon, she didn't hesitate for a second before calling off our vacation. It had been a grueling procedure, and she made it clear that any minor setback could turn fatal. Ever since Mark resurfaced as Isabella's patient, I found myself tallying up these small moments of letdown. I couldn't really fault her for being a committed doctor because her passion for her work was one of the reasons I fell for her in the first place. I also couldn't just ignore the elephant in the room, which was that Mark had been her first love back in college. Ultimately, I ended up boarding the flight to Maui all on my own. I made up my mind to let the relationship go and give Isabella her space. I'd spent months meticulously planning this trip, obsessing over everything from the local weather patterns to the highest-rated resorts. I'd put together a 15-page itinerary based on hundreds of Instagram posts and travel blogs. I just couldn't stand the thought of all that effort and excitement being for nothing. That's why I lost my cool when Isabella broke the news that she was staying behind. She told me Mark was back in the ER because he wasn't feeling right, and she claimed she couldn't possibly leave him in that state. Mark was her old flame from their days at UChicago. 3 months ago, he was diagnosed with a serious heart condition and flew across the country specifically so Isabella could be the one to treat him. Since then, Isabella had been living on edge. I remember the night his labs came back. She stayed up until dawn in her home office, buried under a mountain of medical journals. She even called in favors from her retired mentors to put together a specialist team for a consultation. She pulled every string she had and exhausted herself making sure Mark's surgery went off without a hitch. She was even the lead surgeon in the operating room. It made me realize that Isabella wasn't just a dedicated physician. She was probably the most devoted ex-girlfriend on the planet. Even after he was cleared, Isabella's nerves never settled. She struggled to sleep, and I'd often find her out on the balcony in the middle of the night, staring into the distance with a cigarette in her hand. The tiny orange ember would glow between her fingers in the pale moonlight. Isabella had always been so health-conscious and disciplined, so seeing her smoke was a shock. One night, I stood behind her in the cold in just my pajamas for what felt like forever, but she was so lost in thought she didn't even know I was there. Every time Mark had a follow-up appointment, she obsessed over every single line item in his charts. She was constantly on him about eating right, getting enough greens, and not overexerting himself. I caught a glimpse of the iMessages she sent him. They were incredibly long and filled with motherly advice. All it took was one call from Mark to make her drop whatever she was doing and run to him. It happened on her birthday, right after I'd spent 3 hours in the kitchen cooking a 5-course meal. I ended up with a few nasty burns on my hand from the oil splattering. It took a few days for them to scab over before she even noticed, and when she finally did, she reached for the Neosporin. She had this tone of exhausted pity when she said, "Davis, you really don't need to do all this. Besides, all that heavy, salty food isn't exactly great for your heart anyway." That was the last straw for me. Didn't he have that surgery 3 months ago? I snapped, unable to keep the bitterness out of my voice. What's the crisis this time? Is Mark having another phantom pain? Isabella just rubbed her temples, and I could see how bloodshot her eyes were from stress. "Davis, do you have to be so heartless? Cardiac recovery is a minefield, and complications can happen at any time. This isn't some minor cold we're talking about. We can go on vacation whenever we want. Are you seriously trying to compete with a sick man for my attention?" I let out a dry, hollow laugh. "And when exactly is whenever, Isabella? You've been a surgeon for years, and I can count your days off on one hand. I've spent our entire relationship bending over backward to fit into the tiny gaps in your schedule. I'm used to our plans getting ruined. It's basically our brand at this point. The most exotic place we've ever been together is a 2-hour drive away." Her department had only granted her these 5 days off because our wedding was right around the corner. She knew better than anyone how much this trip meant to me. But now, she just stared at me with this look of pure, soul-crushing exhaustion. Her eyes were colder than a Chicago winter when she said, "Stop it, Davis. I'm exhausted." My eyes stung, and I clenched my fists so hard my nails drew blood. There was a dull ache in my chest as I spat out, "Isabella, I truly hope you give this much a damn about all your patients, not just the one you used to sleep with. It was late March, and the wind still had a bite to it. Isabella didn't even try to stop me when I walked out the door. I headed down to the river walk, letting the freezing air fill my lungs. I pulled my jacket tight against the wind. I'm not a monster, and I never wanted to be the guy who talks trash about a sick person. When Mark first got diagnosed, I was actually concerned for the guy. I knew Isabella was the top thoracic surgeon in Chicago, and having her there gave him the best shot at survival. It made total sense why he'd want her. Life is precious, I get that. So while they were prepping for the surgery, I was the one bringing Isabella takeout every night so she wouldn't have to survive on hospital cafeteria food. She wasn't picky, but she'd get so caught up in her rounds that she'd forget to eat until the only thing left was a stale bagel. I just wanted to make sure she had something real in her stomach, even if it was at midnight. I guess the fighting really started when I realized that the doctor-patient relationship didn't end after he was discharged. Even months later, her phone was constantly buzzing with messages from him. I'd see her texting him to make sure he was eating his greens and getting enough sleep. "Isabella, are you his surgeon or his nanny?" I finally asked her one night. She didn't even argue. She just gave me this blank look. A few days later, she took me to the hospital to see him. Looking through the window of his room, I saw Mark looking small and fragile in his gown. His arms were like toothpicks, covered in those nasty yellow and purple bruises you get from too many 4 drips. It was honestly hard to look at. He looked like he was made of glass, his face pale and his brow furrowed, even while he was out cold. I didn't know what to say. I remember the old Mark. He used to be this charismatic, athletic guy who could actually hold his own standing next to a woman as stunning as Isabella. Isabella handed me her phone, her expression guarded, but her eyes full of a heavy, quiet grief. "Davis, I'm a professional. It doesn't matter whose name is on the chart. I give every patient everything I've got. He's too young to die, Davis. He deserves a chance at a life. If you're worried, read the text yourself. I have nothing to hide." I just nodded and buried my frustration deep down inside. But I had to wonder if she was being honest with herself. Mark had a pharmacy's worth of meds to take, and Isabella, who was usually the most efficient person I knew, spent hours obsessing over his specific dosages. I asked her about it once. "I thought you could do this in your sleep. Why the constant changes?" She just gave me a tired smile and said, "It's a delicate balance, Davis. Chemistry is complicated." I ran into Mark one afternoon when I was dropping off lunch for Isabella. He pointed to his empty 4 bag and said his nurse was busy, then asked if I'd mind swinging by the pharmacy to pick up his prescription. I said sure. When I got to the pharmacy, the old guy behind the counter chuckled as he read the order. This guy must be a real character. Why is he so terrified of a little bitter taste? "Look at this." She ordered the sugar-coated versions of everything. Usually you just suck it up when you're sick, but she went out of her way for him. He pointed to Isabella's signature at the bottom, impressed by the extra effort. The rest of what he said was a blur. All I know is that those tiny plastic bottles felt like lead in my hands. My chest felt so tight, I could barely catch my breath. Isabella was the queen of logic. Whenever I complained about a pill being hard to swallow, she'd just give me this icy, judgmental look that made me feel like a child. "Grow up, Davis. It's just medicine," she'd say. But love shows up in the things you don't even realize you're doing. Her heart had already shifted back to him, even if she didn't know it yet. A light drizzle started as I made my way back to the apartment. I noticed she'd already lined up the shoes I'd kicked off in a huff earlier. There was a simple dinner waiting for me on the table. Isabella was standing by the window, silhouetted against the city lights. "Dinner's ready," she said, her voice so level you'd think we hadn't just had a blowout argument. I stayed silent. Usually, I'd be the one to cave and apologize just to keep the peace, but not tonight. Looking back, every single fight we had about Mark just got swept under the rug. It was exhausting. Isabella would just stand there like a clinical observer while I fell apart, waiting for me to go through the motions of being angry until I eventually calmed myself down. We'd always make up, but nothing ever changed. The whole routine felt pathetic. "Davis," she said, stepping toward me when I didn't answer. "I have to head back to the clinic in a bit." I stared at the hardwood floor, my voice sounding like it belonged to a stranger. I'm done, Isabella. We're over. She froze just inches away from me. What? What? It doesn't matter why. I took a shaky breath and gave her a sad excuse for a smile. You keep saying how exhausted you are, but you never once stopped to think that I might be burnt out too. I can't do this anymore. She didn't say anything for a long time. I saw a flicker of genuine confusion in her eyes, and I searched her face for anything else. Anger, heartbreak, maybe a little bit of regret. There was nothing but a blank slate. She checked her Apple Watch and said, I have a bypass at 3 and a board meeting at 6. I'll be back by 9. We'll talk then. I watched her walk past me, grab her keys, and head out. Her stride was as confident and purposeful as if she were heading into a routine consultation. That was Isabella. Even as her world was ending, she stayed perfectly composed. Actually, that's not true. I remember hearing about how messy it was when she and Mark broke up the first time. She'd ended up in the ER with a stomach hemorrhage after a night of heavy drinking. Her old roommate told me the whole story once. Graduation is brutal on couples, she'd said. We were all drowning in med school finals and residency applications. Isabella was pulling all-nighters in the lab to help him finish his thesis while he was out partying. He told her he was too sick to see her, but when she drove across town to surprise him with soup, she found him at a bar celebrating a coworker's birthday. Don't be a jerk like Mark, her friend had warned me. Karma has a way of catching up with people who treat good hearts like trash. Back then, I didn't know the full story, so I didn't take sides. But I'll never forget how broken she looked in that hospital bed. She definitely had feelings. She just chose never to let me see them. I wiped my face and checked the time. It was only 2:30 p.m. I had more than enough time to get out before she came home. I started throwing my life into boxes and called a local moving company. I'd always try to keep my footprint small in this apartment, but I still managed to accumulate a lot of junk. I found that handmade rose I'd bought her at a street fair and those cheesy custom mugs with our faces on them. I tossed the sentimental stuff straight into the dumpster. By 8:30, the movers were gone. I had 2 missed calls and a text from Isabella that read, Davis, I think you just need some space to cool off. I could picture her typing that with a sigh, convinced I was just throwing a temper tantrum. I didn't even reply. I just hit block. It was drizzling the day I left, one of those gray, miserable days that makes everything feel heavier. But the next morning, the sun was out and the sky was perfectly clear. I took it as a sign that I was finally leaving the gloom behind. Around lunchtime, my phone rang with a number I didn't have saved. I knew it was her before I even picked up. Davis, where the hell are you? She demanded. I took a deep breath. I was serious yesterday, Isabella. We're done. Davis, I had a trauma case last night. I didn't get through the door until 1 a.m., and I realized you'd blocked me. It took a second for it to sink in that she was actually trying to justify her silence. Okay, I said. I didn't really care about her excuses anymore. I knew her job was demanding, and I'd spent years being the understanding partner who never complained about being second best. But those days were over. I'm not accepting this breakup, she said, her voice regaining its usual clinical cool. If you're feeling burnt-out, we could talk about it. If it's about Maui, we'll just rebook it for next month. I couldn't help but laugh. Rebook it? For when? Isabella? After Mark's next checkup? That's not a vacation. That's just me waiting for a gap in your real life. There was a long silence on the other end. It's not like that, she finally whispered. I didn't let her finish. You want a reason? Fine. Tell me, Isabella, do you even love me? Do you love me more than you love him? Because if you do, I'm having a really hard time seeing it. Why am I always your second choice? She started talking faster, sounding defensive. Mark is my patient, Davis. I have a professional and moral obligation to him. I can't just let someone die. If you're looking for a love that comes before my medical ethics, then I don't know what to tell you. I actually laughed. See? I asked about us, and your first instinct was to defend him. Ask yourself honestly, Isabella, do you even know what loving me looks like? Have you thought about my feelings even once since he came back into the picture? The silence on the line was deafening. I kept going, even though my heart was pounding. You think I'm just being dramatic and need to cool off. But if being with you means a lifetime of being sidelined and ignored, then I've made my decision. I'm out." The silence stretched on forever. I could hear her breathing get ragged, the first crack in her perfect armor. "I'm sorry, Davis," she finally choked out. I hung up. She didn't call back. I figured she'd finally realized that with Mark back in her life, there wasn't really any room left for me anyway. Maybe I was doing her a favor. I should have done this a long time ago. While I was half-heartedly scrolling through apartment listings, an ad popped up for a last-minute deal to Maui. It was a steal compared to what I'd originally paid, including a suite upgrade and some excursions. The dates were 2 weeks earlier than our original trip. Being a freelance concept artist meant I could work from anywhere, so I figured why not? I rebooked everything and headed to the airport. Maui in the off-season was exactly what I needed. On my last night, after weeks of zero contact, Isabella's name popped up on my screen. "Davis, I've officially handed Mark's case over to another surgeon," she said. "I'm ready to go on that trip with you now. I messed up, Davis. Please, just let me make it up to you." Her voice sounded fragile, like she was on the verge of a breakdown. I thought back to the snorkeling trip I'd taken a few days prior. The way the light hit the reefs and the schools of tropical fish was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. It was the kind of beauty that makes you realize how big the world is. "Isabella," I said softly, "I'm already here. I'm in Maui." I heard her breath hitch. I told her about the deal I found and how I just decided to go for it. The irony was, I'd actually known Isabella way longer than Mark ever had. We went to the same high school. She was a year ahead of me. I still remember her giving the welcome address at orientation. She was so poised and confident. She had every freshman guy in that auditorium swooning within 5 minutes, myself included. I was a bit of a troublemaker back then, didn't care about much. I spent 6 months trying to get her to notice me, and I even got her number, but she wouldn't give me the time of day. Then my grades absolutely tanked during midterms. My teacher called my parents in for a meeting. Right there in the faculty lounge, my dad started laying into me, telling me I was a loser just like my mother. He sneered at me in front of everyone. "Is all you think about girls? Are you really this pathetic? You're going to end up just like her, chasing after people who don't want you." My teacher tried to intervene, but my dad was on a roll. The whole hallway could hear him. The next day, I was trying to sleep through lunch at my desk, feeling like total trash. Then I heard my name. Isabella was standing in the doorway, the sun hitting her from behind. "Davis," she said. I ignored her. "Davis," she tried again. My classmates started whistling, so I finally got up and walked over. "You want to make a bet, Davis?" she asked with a smirk. I just stared at her. "If you break the top 100 on the next big exam, I'll finally go to the movies with you." I thought she was joking. I was ranked somewhere in the 300s. There was no way. "What? Are you scared?" she teased. "In your dreams," I snapped back. She just smiled, knowing she'd hooked me. I had no idea why she was doing it, but I studied like a maniac and landed at 92nd. When the rankings went up, she didn't back out. I couldn't even remember which movie I'd originally asked her to, so I just picked one. It was some sappy rom-com that I normally would have hated. I kept glancing over at her, mesmerized by how perfect she looked in the dim light of the theater. I looked away fast every time she moved, but she was too into the movie to notice. When the credits rolled, I asked if she wanted to grab a burger. She gave me this knowing look. "Another date? That's going to cost you." "What are you talking about?" I asked. "Top 50 on the finals," she said. "Are you kidding me?" I groaned. Breaking the top 100 nearly killed me. 50 was impossible. She looked me dead in the eye. "Most people couldn't. But you? You're smarter than you look, Davis." I just rolled my eyes. Then, she pulled out a pen and a scrap of paper. She scribbled something down and handed it to me. "I already have your number," I said. "That's for homework help," she replied. "Email me your questions once a week. Minimum of 5, or I'm not helping you." I spent so much time wondering why she was helping me, even letting myself hope she actually liked me. On her graduation day, I finally worked up the courage to ask, "Isabella, do you like me?" Because I really... She started coughing on her water and shoved a pile of study guides into my chest. "Just focus on your SATs, Davis," she said, cutting me off. It was a soft rejection, but I wasn't even mad. "I saw your old transcripts," she continued. "You were a straight A student in middle school. You're not a slacker, Davis. You started acting out and chasing girls the second your parents' marriage started falling apart. You're better than that." She stopped, giving me a look that said she knew exactly what I was going through. I was speechless. That was the year my dad found out about my mom's affair. Our house was a war zone, and they were too busy hating each other to notice me. I thought if I messed up enough, they'd have to stop fighting to deal with me. But it was only after the divorce, when I started winning awards again, that they suddenly remembered I existed. Then they started competing for my affection like it was a game. I realized then that you can't force people to stay if they want to go. The only thing you can control is your own life. "See you at Stanford, Davis," she said. The golden hour light hit her face just right, and for a second, I couldn't breathe. I felt this surge of hope I hadn't felt in years. "See you there," I promised. I spent my senior year working my tail off, and by the following September, I was on a flight to Palo Alto. But things didn't exactly go as planned. When Davis told her it was over, Isabella felt like the world had stopped. Her mind was racing with a million things she wanted to say, but she couldn't find the words. She checked her watch. She had a surgery in an hour. She told herself that personal drama had no place in the hospital. A surgeon can't afford to be emotional before a procedure. It's a matter of life and death. She decided the breakup would just have to wait. As soon as she was out of the OR, she paged him. Nothing. She sat through a grueling meeting and tried again, but it went straight to voicemail. A knot started forming in her stomach. Was he actually serious this time? She started grabbing her coat, determined to go to his place and fix this. Just then, a nurse burst in with a trauma alert. She barely had time to type out a quick text before she was pulled back into the ER. She regretted the tone of the message the second she hit send. Davis wasn't the type to play games or make empty threats. If he said it was over, he meant it. It dawned on her that maybe she was the one who had been delusional, not him. When she finally walked into the apartment at 1 a.m., the silence was deafening. She opened the closet and found it half empty. All his little sketches and books were gone from the shelves. Her throat felt tight. She went to the kitchen for a glass of water and saw his mug was missing from the rack. Only hers was left, looking pathetic and lonely. Her hand was shaking so hard she could barely type. She called him over and over, but it didn't even ring. He'd really done it. He'd vanished without even a note. She'd told him to wait, and he'd always waited before. He'd spent years falling asleep on that couch waiting for her to get off a shift. She couldn't understand why he couldn't give her just one more night. She tossed and turned until the sun came up. During her lunch break, she swallowed her pride and used a nurse's phone to call him. The call was a disaster. Every word out of his mouth felt like a punch to the gut. He was asking questions she didn't have the answers to, and it was tearing her apart. A nurse interrupted her to say the patient in 1707 was asking for her. That was Mark's room. She sighed and headed over. Mark was sitting up in bed, laughing at some Netflix show. "Isabella, you have to see this," he said, beaming as he held out his iPad. "It's hilarious, seriously." "The nurse said you were in pain, Mark." "Where?" she asked, her voice flat. He pouted like a kid. "Relax, I just wanted to see you. You're always so stressed." "My stomach kind of hurts. Maybe a headache?" "What's the cure, doc?" Isabella ignored the flirting and checked his charts. Everything looked perfect. He was physically fine. "Are you following the meal plan?" "Taking the meds?" she asked. Mark hopped out of bed and grabbed his tray, making a face at the steamed vegetables. He held up a piece of broccoli with a fork. "Look at this rabbit food, Isabella. I'm starving here. You expect me to live on this?" She remembered why they'd broken up the first time. Mark was high maintenance, always demanding her time and throwing fits when she had to work. "Why don't you just marry the hospital?" he'd sneer back then. "You're never around. What's the point of even being in a relationship with you? And don't tell me you and that resident are just friends. It was a work dinner, Mark. And you want to talk about cheating when you were constantly flirting with the undergrads." Suddenly, she thought of Davis. When Davis first moved to the city for school, he'd come by her dorm all the time, so happy to see her. But after he saw her with Mark, he stopped showing up. Mark had been so cruel to him the one time they met. She'd been so young and stupidly in love with Mark that she let it happen. After the breakup, Mark tried to win her back with a fancy cake and some half-hearted apologies at the med school library. She wasn't having it. Mark lost his temper and threw the cake on the floor. I know that Davis kid was bringing you meals every day while you were sick. You're probably sleeping with him already. Fine, have him. Isabella was floored. She'd been in the hospital for 2 weeks back then, and she'd always assumed the daily meals were just her roommate being nice and ordering Uber Eats. Her roommate finally confessed years later. Davis said hospital food was garbage. He was doing an internship nearby and spent his lunch breaks cooking for you, so you'd actually eat something healthy. He didn't want to make things weird since you were with Mark, so he made me pretend I bought it. I'm still waiting for him to pay me back for all that acting. She remembered driving Davis home one night. He'd been crying, but he tried to blame it on the wind. There wasn't even a breeze that night, just a clear sky full of stars. The memory of that one tear felt like a physical burn. Come on, Isabella, Mark said, snapping her back to the present. One order of spicy wings, and I promise I'll be the perfect patient. Mark was laying it on thick. She looked down at his hand on her arm and realized exactly what he was doing. Back then, she was just a struggling student he could push around. Now, she was one of the most successful surgeons in Chicago. Mark was a predator, always looking for the best deal. He probably thought Davis was a total pushover. Davis had stayed through her darkest hours, only to leave just as things were getting better. She felt a wave of self-loathing. She spent her life saving strangers, but had managed to destroy the one person who actually loved her. She pulled her arm away, her professional mask sliding back into place. Your labs are clear, Mark. You're being discharged. Follow up with your GP, because you won't be seeing me again. Mark looked stunned. If you're actually in pain, call a specialist. If you're just looking for attention, find it somewhere else. I'm done being your safety net. And stop wasting my time. I have real patients to see. Mark's face twisted. You can't talk to me like that. I'm a patient. I have rights. I'll have your medical license for this. Isabella gave him a cold, terrifying smile. Go ahead. See how far that gets you. A week after I got back from Hawaii, my phone rang. It was my realtor. Hey, Davis, the keys to the new place will be ready next month. You want to schedule a walkthrough? I'd almost forgotten about the house. We bought it last year when we were still planning a wedding. The deed was in my name, but Isabella had put down the cash. I remember showing her my savings account and promising I'd pay her back every cent once my career took off. She'd laughed and kissed me, saying, "Good, because I'm officially broke now. You'd better be ready to be the breadwinner for a while." I told the realtor to call Isabella instead, but he said that since I was the only one on the paperwork, I had to be the one to sign off on everything. Isabella made great money as a surgeon, so the house was already paid off. I didn't want her money tying us together anymore. I called her, and she picked up on the first ring. I told her we needed to figure out how to get the house back in her name. Are you really that desperate to erase me from your life, Davis? She asked, her voice trembling. I have a patient. We'll deal with it later, she said before hanging up. The realtor kept bugging me, so I eventually just went down to the office to handle the paperwork alone. Standing in that empty house, I realized I still had all that savings I'd offered her. I could finally buy a place that was actually mine. I went on a house hunting binge and found this perfect little bungalow in Lincoln Park. It had 2 bedrooms and a tiny backyard that was just begging for a garden. I had enough for the down payment and a decent renovation budget. I was so hyped that I started telling the seller all my plans. I'm going to plant a ton of roses back here and put in a porch swing, I told her. It'll be the perfect spot to set up my easel. The seller was this cool, confident woman named Chloe. She grinned at me. A rose garden and an art studio? Sounds like the dream. You're an artist. You teach art? She asked. Nah, I do concept work for games, I said, showing her my portfolio on my phone. Her jaw practically dropped. Wait, you did these? These are incredible. I got a little embarrassed, but she was buzzing. I'm actually starting my own indie studio. That's why I'm selling the place, to fund the project. You want a job? Look, we're a startup, so I can't pay you AAA rates yet, she admitted. But come by the office. I think you'll love what we're building. The world building is insane, she promised. I figured why not? After a few meetings, I realized Chloe was the real deal. She was a Stanford CS grad and had a killer team. One evening, Chloe was dropping me off after a late session when we ran into the last person I wanted to see, Mark. He was leaning against a lamppost, giving us this smug, punchable grin. He looked a little thinner after the surgery, which I guess gave him that tortured artist look he loved so much. "Look at you, Davis," he drawled. "Already moved on to a new girl, while Isabella is still crying over you? I didn't know you had it in you." Chloe looked like she was about to deck him, but I stepped in front of her. I was tired of his games. I didn't care why he hated me. I just wasn't going to take it anymore. "You want to talk about strings, Mark? The only reason you're even standing here breathing is because your ex-girlfriend is a better person than you'll ever be." His face went pale. "You prick." I cut him off. "Go home, Mark. You're lucky to be alive. Don't waste the heart Isabella literally saved by being a jerk." He glared at me, muttered something under his breath, and stormed off. Not 10 minutes later, Isabella's SUV pulled up. She marched straight toward us. Chloe watched her approach, then looked at me with a smirk. "Oh, I get it now," she whispered. "Davis," Isabella said, her voice tight. She looked exhausted, like she hadn't slept in weeks. She lost weight, too. "Who's this?" she asked, her eyes darting to Chloe. "She's my business partner," I said. Isabella seemed to relax for a split second. She reached out to grab my arm, but Chloe stepped between us. "You're a partner who seems to be forgetting her place," Isabella snapped. Chloe didn't blink. "My place? That's rich coming from the ex who can't take a hint." Isabella looked like she was ready to explode. I told Chloe I'd catch up with her later. Isabella offered me a ride, but I just shook my head. She looked like I'd slapped her. "Are we really doing this, Davis? Are we just strangers now?" she whispered. I felt a pang of guilt, but it passed quickly. "Just let me know when you can sign the papers for the house," I said. She ignored me. "I messed up, Davis. I know that now. I'll change, I promise. I'll put you first always. Just give me one more chance to love you the way you loved me." She lunged forward and hugged me, sobbing into my shoulder. I could feel her shaking. I gently but firmly pulled her arms off me. Her face was a mess of tears in the streetlight. "You loved me for a decade, Davis. You can't just turn that off." I looked her straight in the eye. "Isabella, if you break your leg and don't go to the doctor, the bone set's wrong and the wound starts to rot. You're a surgeon. You know what happens next, right?" Her face went ghost white. She closed her eyes, and when she opened them, the realization had finally set in. "You have to amputate," she whispered. "Exactly," I said with a sad smile. "That's what I had to do to survive you." After that, she finally stopped calling. She never signed the papers, so I just mailed the keys to her office and washed my hands of it. I buried myself in work at the studio. Chloe's team was amazing, just a bunch of talented kids working toward a dream. Isabella used to nag me about my sleep schedule, but now I was pulling all-nighters because I actually loved what I was doing. I was a total workaholic. The day I finished the final environment renders, Chloe literally pulled the plug on my workstation. "Hey, I hadn't saved yet," I yelled. She just grinned. "I'm taking a mental health day, which means you are too. Let's go." I ended up wandering through a garden center later that afternoon. I bought a bunch of rose bushes and seeds, ready to finally start my garden. I was halfway through digging a hole when my phone exploded. It was Chloe, and she sounded frantic. "Davis, your ex is losing it in the middle of the mall. Get down here." I dropped my shovel and ran. I found Chloe looking absolutely livid near the food court. She was standing next to some tall, athletic-looking guy. Isabella was a few feet away, looking like she was about to commit a felony. "Oh good, you're here," Isabella snapped. "Tell your girlfriend to back off." I was just minding my own business when she started screaming at me, Chloe said, fake sobbing and leaning into the guy next to her. "She almost ruined my outfit with her latte. I'm traumatized, Davis." Chloe wasn't hurt. She was just enjoying the drama. I had to hide a smile. "I'm calling my lawyer. This is assault," Chloe wailed, clearly overacting. Isabella rolled her eyes. "Are you really this blind, Davis? She's out here on a date with this guy while you're at home. She's playing you." "He's not Chloe started, but Isabella cut her off. "I see you picking him up every morning, and here you are with another guy. You're a user, Chloe." Chloe stopped fake crying. "Wait, how do you know she picks me up?" I asked. Isabella looked away, her face turning red. Chloe grabbed the guy's arm. "This is Justin. He's my cousin. My actual, blood-related cousin. He was helping me pick out a birthday present." "Don't let this psycho get in our heads, Davis." I was dying laughing. I went into a CVS to grab some stuff for Chloe's injuries and told Justin to take her for a drink to calm her down. I tried to give Isabella some antiseptic for a scratch on her hand, but she wouldn't take it. I turned to walk away, but she grabbed my wrist. "I wasn't stalking you, Davis. I promise. Please don't be mad. I'm leaving Chicago," she said, her voice small. "I just wanted to see you one last time." I looked at her, shocked. "I volunteered for a medical mission in rural Alaska," she explained. "I'll be there for at least 3 years. Don't worry about me. I'll be fine. I can handle myself." I realized that if I can't be with you, I might as well be somewhere I can actually make a difference. I didn't know what to say. I just looked at her and said, "Good luck, Isabella. Stay safe." The night before a game launched, a postcard arrived from Alaska. It was a picture of the tundra under the northern lights. Chloe looked at it and sighed. She traced the edge of the card. "You know, in gaming, the hardest attacks to dodge are the ones with a long wind-up and the ones that hit you instantly. Your ex spent 10 years winding up that relationship, and you ended it in a second. It's going to take her a lifetime to recover from that." I just rolled my eyes and tucked the card into a book on my shelf. I realized then that the magic wasn't in her. It was in the way I loved her. I was the one who made our relationship beautiful, not her. I have a lot of love to give, and I'm not going to waste it anymore. Chloe started poking me in the arm. "Hey, stop brooding. The game is going to be a hit. Now, when are you going to show me this famous rose garden of yours?" This story is a reminder that the glow you see in someone else is actually your own light reflecting back at you. When a relationship forces you to cut it away, like an amputation just to save your soul, remember that walking away isn't giving up. It is a powerful reclamation of your expectations and your dignity. You don't need to beg for a place in someone else's life. When you stop waiting for an answer and start tending to your own garden, you'll realize that you are the spring and your own roses will bloom when the time is right.